The world is changing. The fourth industrial revolution is upon us, but can we keep up? Welcome back to The Fix. I'm Karima Brown, and joining me in the discussion with Minister of Higher Education is, of course, Peter Bruce, Sunday Times columnist, and, of course, he's a regular here on The Fix. Peter, it's great to have you back.
Thank you. Very nice to be here, and good evening, Minister. I was fascinated by that conversation because one of the things that we don't talk about in education is the difference between what education can provide to an economy and what skills can provide to an economy. And the development economists at Harvard are beginning to make a big song and dance about this. And the ANC, if you don't mind me saying, Minister, has a sort of quite equivocal attitude towards skills development. It's big on skills development, but it won't let skills into the country. It's very difficult to immigrate to South Africa if you're outside and you may know something. And we make it incredibly hard for people to come here and impart skills to people who need them. The more complex we are, the more skills we need, and the more successful we'll be. Why? You've had experience all along the line now, and as Home Affairs Minister as well, you were responsible for some of the sort of legislation that made it even more difficult for people to come to South Africa. Why is that? Why don't we just let anybody come, and provided they've got a
country and actually work. This is something we're not yet good at, and it's something I think we should do.
Because scarce skills, almost all skills are scarce in this country now. It's the drain.
Not quite all. There are South Africans who can't find work and are graduates. So we need to, address that as well. Many countries do have regulations around use of scarce skills and permits. But what they're better at than South Africa is they often have a better local development program so that there's a mentoring that goes alongside. We're not quite as organized, and these are lessons I think we need to learn.
Peter, I want to come in here quickly on the issue of making it easier for people to come in. President Ramaphosa recently said that we need to ease restrictions on the continent itself. Africans need to be able to travel. Now, when I recently went to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, I got a visa on arrival. Are we ready for that?
I think it's something that the Minister of Home Affairs is certainly looking at, because it should be possible for particular categories of travellers who come for a short stay to access a visa at the airport on payment of a fee. It's done even by a machine in some countries. So I think these are things that we need to consider. But then we must use technology. Our biometrics should be better. Our immigration services should be more efficient, so that you don't have travellers then stuck for many hours at the airport.
What's so interesting is if you go to Thailand, Karima, nobody asks you what you're there for, where you're going, or what you're doing, or who you're doing it with. You simply walk through, and you've got 30 days. Completely, no questions asked. You pay nothing. You literally walk through the immigration office. He stamps a piece of paper, doesn't look at you. It's quite extraordinary. Can I just ask another question on skills development? Minister, private involvement in education. Would the government allow the private sector, a private benefactor, a company, to build a university here and recognize its qualifications?
Well, there are already institutions in the country which are offering education as private higher education institutions. Over 195 programs.
And would somebody be able to build a private medical school in South Africa?
At the moment, medical training is primarily through public institutions, but I'm not aware of a prohibition. So I'm sure it's something that should be could be discussed with the Minister of Health.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to focus on is, of course, the for-list movement. You have spoken about the impact and the importance of us waking up, us oldies, if you like, waking up to the demands of the young people and the issues that they are raising. And you keep an arm's length at curriculum because, of course, you don't want to tell universities what to teach. But there is a demand that what is being taught need to change. How do you engage universities in that tightrope where you explain to them that things need to change, but without interfering or being seen to tell them and give them, instructions?
It's a delicate balance that one has to strike, because in countries where governments are very involved in university affairs, especially academics and admissions, you then find the government telling institutions what they should do, and it detracts from the quality that institutions should offer. So I think one continues with deliberations with institutions. I met the Vice Chancellors last week, Friday, and we had an excellent discussion.
In fact, let me ask you about that meeting. When I spoke with the university's chair just after former President Zuma made that announcement around education, they were gobsmacked because they didn't know that it was coming. What exactly was the content of your discussion? And moreover, did they raise with you, Minister, their own financial difficulties? Because they're very worried about the debt exposure. What if government, for example, can't pay back the monies that you're supposed to give to universities because education is now free?
Well, we're certainly looking at the whole debt question. I think less with respect to universities being in debt at the moment, except what's owed through NSFAS due to poor administrative lags that we need to deal with. But there has been an improvement in the subsidy to institutions. So we didn't really have
How much did you improve that subsidy by, Minister?
Gosh, it's gone up quite significantly. It would be in my budget speech somewhere. But the intention is that over a 5-year period, we should be spending 1% of GDP
in fact,
on the allocations to higher education.
In your budget speech that over fee adjustments are justified and that fees remain affordable. You say our historically disadvantaged institutions will also receive a support grant of 2.5 billion over a period of 5 years.
That's
and then you say that 9.3 or rather 934 million university capacity development program starts this year.
Right, yeah.
But you were very scathing about the management of historically black universities.
Absolutely, I'm worried
what
about
exactly
leadership
is going wrong there? Why can't we get that right?
Well, a number of them have all sorts of very strange problems. Poor administration, poor financial management, really negative procurement practices, so corruption. Some of the quality of the academic... No, it's poor leadership. And I think we need to change the persons.
Does the leadership come from the council's minister or from the vice?
Both.
Really?
Both. I'm meeting council chairs next week to just discuss some of my concerns. I have intervened in 2 institutions already, and I'll continue to make it clear that I expect
your
good
predecessor
performance.
in this job, I know, upset some vice-chancellors by making his own appointments to the university councils of people who often weren't familiar with the university or its environment or its history. Would you continue to make appointments to councils?
Well, there are ministerial appointees. This is allowed in the legislation. I think it's 5. But one must appoint persons who assist the university. It's not about me as minister, it's about the institutions. And this is very, very important. I have made changes recently to one university where the council's term had come to an end.
Yeah.
And those persons that I had very good reports were not providing the kind of governance support the university should get. I removed them.
Sorry, Karima, where was that? Where did...
I'm not going to say.
Why won't you tell us?
Yeah. I just don't think it's appropriate.
Is it when are you planning to make this announcement?
I'm trying to help the universities to really get up to speed. And once you engage in a sort of public wrangle about them, I don't think it's helpful.
You know, Minister, I was in Alice in December, and of course we've got, you know, a historical university there of huge significance, and I was appalled at the infrastructure crumbling, literally buildings, not, you know, walls that are crumbling. A university so important as that university, Fort Hare, which of course was this bed of you know, leaders, where leaders were coming from. Apart from the corruption, apart from the poor leadership and the procurement practices, you've built other universities like in the Northern Cape and so on. Why are universities in places such as Alice, that has such historical significance, being so neglected, particularly at an infrastructure level?
It's a range of reasons. Funding is one. Secondly, you did have many years, again, of very bad administrative and financial problems at that university. A third aspect is the municipality is a very small one that is unable to provide the level of maintenance and other support that a university such as Fort Hare would require.
But you know, I was really interestingly surprised and actually taken aback by the fact that the VC of that university had to in fact receive protection because he was moving against people who were accused of the corrupt practices.
Well, this is a pattern in South Africa. They support corrupt people. And it's very difficult to, you know, hold up integrity. This is something we've got to do much more on. So how do you
incentivize whistleblowers to come forward to deal with corruption, particularly at historically black universities, but everywhere else? You know, even universities referred to as kind of historically advantaged universities.
Well, I have a report from one of the universities. I still haven't opened the envelope, so I'm not going to talk about it. But very bad practices, and these are not your historically black. So there's, you know, criminal action and corruption all over, some of it by us as parents. You know, I want my child to get in, they must get into engineering, and I act in cahoots with particular individuals. All of this must be stopped, and where we discover it, I will have no compunction but to take action.
It's a microcosm, I suppose one would say, of the sort of wider society that we live in.
Unfortunately.
Are you able to draw on examples from other countries who face similar problems at tertiary institutions, universities, where poor governance has been overcome by simply the application of a new set of thinking, a new way of thinking, or new rules about how we teach young people?
I think South Africa's got a very good regulatory framework for higher education, and really it sort of imposes a great deal of trust in those who exercise governance and leadership.
But there's a
We're
huge
now
lack
having
of trust,
to
Minister.
develop codes of conduct that the councils must attach to because of the experience that we've had. So we are elaborating the existing framework in order to address the inadequacies. As to systems that work, on the continent, I think you have perhaps Botswana. Ghana's had many years of problems, but they're overcoming those. Nigeria has improved with certain of their institutions becoming good research-intensive institutions. And then overseas, of course, I mean, they've had hundreds of years of developing practices. But for me, I think we must exercise better oversight. Our expectations must be held very high, and we must hold the leaders of institutions and the councils to the rules that we set in place.
Absolutely. Of course, accountability, the key question. Minister, thank you so very much for joining us here on The Fix. That's, of course, the Minister for Higher Education, Naledi Pandor. Up next, we look ahead. We'll have a panel of journalists who will prepare us for what we'll all be talking about next week.